Super sour skunk cannabis. It's a very nice sativa. I would recommend it. I'd recommend cannabis for as a great medicine, natural medicine. We're continuing Man and His Symbols by Carl Jung, section on Orpheus and the Son of Man. Left, Orpheus charming the beasts with his song in a Roman mosaic. Above, the murder of Orpheus by Thracian women on a Greek vase. Below left, Christ as the Good Shepherd, a 6th century mosaic. Both Orpheus and Christ parallel the archetype of the man of nature, also reflected in the painting by Cranach below of, quote, natural man's innocence. Facing page left, the 18th century French philosopher Rousseau, who put forward the idea of the noble savage, the simple child of nature free of sin and evil. Far right, the title page of Walden by the 19th century American writer Thoreau, who believed in and followed a natural way of life almost wholly independent of civilization. The burden of proof in the argument of, urban versus rural, as far as modes of being, the burden of proof is large squarely on? Those who argue for urban living and quote-unquote civilization and civil society and all of this civics. Burden of proof is on them, same as it's on statists, those who argue for the legitimacy of state authority. It's not on those who would argue for rural living. It's not on, the burden of proof is not on the anarchists. Those who are anarchists, they are anti-state, anti-lord, ruler, those who claim to have this right to rule or divinely ordained divine right to rule over others. It's a claim. And what do they present as the basis for it? They present an old, haggard book, which there are no original copies of, the so-called Holy Bible. There aren't any original copies of this collection. This is an eclectic collection put together. The Pentateuch, the 5 books of the Torah, are the 5 books of to Ra, to the sun, the TETRAGRAMM-ATON. The same one who's been here all along, rising and falling, setting, sitting, sixing. Said it over and over again. We have radius, the radius, which is the rays, because of Re or Ra, the sun, personified in the Egyptian mythology, just like Mithras of Persia. The sun. That's why you have the homophone sun and sun, because man always personifies the sun. And identifies with the sun and the sun's path for good reason. Because nature is what we got. And we got this cycle, this bicycle of summer summit and winter valley, of Cancer, Tropic of Cancer, in Capricorn at 6, Tropic of Capricorn, where the sun will be here in the northern hemisphere now, soon, 21st, today's the 13th. Sagittarius is almost done. Sag of Taurus. the sad sag of Shad. Shad is Hebrew devil. This is where Set is in the Egyptian. The ass who is Set. At 6 of sin, original sin or sign, wave of Eve, sine wave, W-Ave, W-Eve. All the vowels are one, the vow of Els. The vows are the oaths, or the Elizabeths, alphabets, Alephbeths. Elizabeth, Elizabeth, El is God, Elizabeth is an oath. Both as good shepherd and mediator. We're continuing reading now. Man and his symbols. Both as good shepherd and mediator. Orpheus strikes the balance between the Dionysiac religion and the Christian religion. Since we find both Dionysus and Christ in similar roles, though, as I have said, differently oriented as to time and direction in space, one a cyclic religion of the netherworld, the other heavenly and eschatological, or final. This series of initiatory events, drawn from the context of religious history, is repeated endlessly and with practically every conceivable individual twist of meaning in the dreams and fantasies of modern people. In a state of heavy fatigue and depression, a woman undergoing analysis had this fantasy. I sit on the side of a long, narrow table in a high vaulted room with no window. My body is hunched over and shrunken. There is nothing over me but a long white linen cloth that hangs from my shoulders to the floor. Something crucial has happened to me. There is not much life left in me. Red crosses on gold discs appear before my eyes. I recall that I have made some sort of commitment a long time ago, and wherever I am now must be part of this. I sit there a long time. Now I slowly open my eyes, and I see a man who sits beside me, who is to heal me. He appears natural and kind, and he is talking to me, though I don't hear him. He seems to know all about where I have been. I am aware that I am very ugly, and that there must be an odor of death around me. I wonder if he will be repelled. I look at him for a very long time. He does not turn away. I breathe more easily. Then I feel a cool breeze or cool water pour over my body. I wrap the white linen cloth across me now and prepare for a natural sleep. The man's healing hands are on my shoulder. I recall vaguely that there was a time when there were wounds there, but the pressure of his hands seemed to give me strength and healing. This woman had previously felt threatened by doubts about her original affiliation. She had been brought up as a devout Catholic of the old school. But since her youth, she had struggled to free herself from the formal religious conventions followed by her family. Yet the symbolic events of the church year and the richness of her insight into their meaning remained with her throughout the process of her psychological change, and in her analysis I found this working knowledge of religious symbolism most helpful. The significant elements she singled out of her fantasy were the white cloth, which she understood as a sacrificial cloth, the vaulted room, which she considered to be a tomb, and her commitment, which she associated with the experience of submission. This commitment, as she called it, suggested a ritual of initiation with a perilous descent into the vault of death, which symbolized the way she had left church and family to experience God in her own fashion. She had undergone an initiation of Christ in the true symbolic sense, and like him, she had suffered the wounds that preceded this death. The sacrificial cloth suggests the winding sheet or shroud in which the crucified Christ was wrapped and then placed in the tomb. The end of the fantasy introduces the healing figure of a man, loosely associated with me as her analyst, but appearing also in his natural role as a friend fully aware of her experience. He speaks to her in words she cannot yet hear, but his hands are reassuring and give a sense of healing. One senses in this figure the touch and the word of the Good Shepherd, Orpheus or Christ, as mediator and also, of course, as healer. He is on the side of life and has to convince her that she may now come back from the vault of death. Shall we call this rebirth or resurrection? Both, perhaps, or neither. The essential right proclaims itself at the end. The cool breeze or water flowing over her body is the primordial act of purification or cleansing of the sin of death, the essence of true baptism. The same woman had another fantasy in which she felt that her birthday fell upon the day of Christ's resurrection. This was much more meaningful for her than the memory of her mother, who had never given her the feeling of reassurance and renewal she so much wished for on her childhood birthdays. Above left, the Persian god Mithras sacrificing the bull. The sacrifice, also part of Dionysiac rites, can be seen as a symbol of the victory of man's spiritual nature over his animality, of which the bull is a common symbol. This may explain the popularity in some countries of bullfighting. Left. Right. An etching by Picasso, 1935, depicts a girl threatened by a minotaur. Here, as in the myth of Theseus, a symbol of man's uncontrollable, instinctive forces. For all his power and glory, something was lacking, and as she tried to reach him through prayer, he and his cross were lifted up to heaven out of her human reach. In this second fantasy, she fell back upon the symbol of rebirth as a rising sun, and a new feminine symbol began to make its appearance. First of all, it appeared as in quote, embryo in a watery sack, unquote. Then she was carrying an 8-year-old boy through the water, quote, passing a danger point, unquote. Then a new movement occurred in which she no longer felt threatened or under the influence of death. She was, quote, in a forest by a little spring waterfall. Green vines grow all around. In my hands I have a stone bowl in which there is spring water, some green moss and violets. I bathe myself under the waterfall. It is golden and silky, and I feel like a child, unquote. The sense of these events is clear, though it is possible to miss the inner meaning in the cryptic description of so many changing images. Here we have, it seems, a process of rebirth in which a larger spiritual self is reborn and baptized in nature as a child. Meanwhile, she has rescued an older child who was, in some way, her own ego at the most traumatic period of her childhood. She then carried it through water past the danger point, thus indicating her fear of a paralyzing sense of guilt if she should depart too far from her family's conventional religion. But religious symbolism is significant by its absence. All is in the hands of nature, nator. We are clearly in the realm of the shepherd, Orpheus, rather than the risen Christ. A dream followed this sequence, which brought her to a church resembling the church in Assisi with Giotto's frescoes of St. Francis. We'll learn about that next time. Hare Krishna, Mithras. Merry Christmas.